The appendicular skeleton. The appendicular skeleton consists of your girdles, which means the pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle, and also the appendages. The pectoral girdle includes the clavicle, scapula, humerus, radius and ulna. Radius is on the thumb side, ulna is on the pinky side or medial side. The carpals, which are the wrist bones, the metacarpals, which form the palm, and your digits or fingers, which are the phalanges. The lower extremity, the pelvic girdle, includes the coxal bones, the femur, the tibia, which is medial, the fibula, which is lateral, the tarsals, which are the ankle bones, the metatarsals, which form the sole of your feet, and the toes or phalanges. The pectoral girdle attaches the bones of the upper limbs to the axial skeleton. Consists of the scapula and the clavicle. These bones do not articulate with the vertebral column, but are held in place by muscles extending from the vertebral column and the ribs. These muscles make up what is known as the rotator cuff or sits muscles. Sits, S-I-T-S. The clavicle, also known as the collarbone, has a sternal end which attaches to the sternum and a acromial end which is attached to the acromion process of the scapula. The scapula is a flat bone which articulates with the posterior part of the ribs or posterior thorax. The scapula has a lateral border and a medial border or vertebral border. The part of the scapula that is prominent is the spine that runs along the posterior surface. Hence, it is on the back of the scapula. The lateral end contains the acromion process. It is the high point of the shoulder. The acromion end articulates with the clavicle. The glenoid cavity articulates with the head of the humerus. The glenoid cavity. The anterior surface contains the coracoid process. The front. The fossa, or shallow basin-like areas, are attachment sites for the rotator cuff muscles. Subscapular fossa is on the anterior side. The subscapular fossa is on the anterior side. The supraspinous fossa and inferior spinous fossa on the posterior sides. The humerus, or upper arm, articulates proximally with the scapula and distally with the radius and ulna, the humerus. The anterior and posterior humerus have landmarks to help us identify those perspectives. The posterior distal end of the humerus has the olecranon fossa. It's the posterior aspect. The anterior aspect has the coronoid fossa. Notice the difference in the capitulum on the anterior process and the trochlea on the posterior process. The two bones that make up our forearm are the radius and ulna. The radius is lateral in our anatomical position, and the ulna is medial in anatomical position. This is the ulna. The ulna has the olecranon process. The radius has more width of the distal end. Notice here, very important, that the radius and ulna have styloid processes on the distal ends. The carpal bones or wrist bones are individual short bones. In order to identify these bones, our perspective has to be going from lateral to medial. Underneath the thumb, this mnemonic gives us the first letters of each bone's name. Scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform. We also then have to begin underneath the thumb for the trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. This is an anterior perspective. On the posterior perspective, you cannot see the pisiform. This is the posterior perspective. This is the anterior perspective. The manus or hand, remember we identify the metacarpals using Roman numerals beginning from the thumb. This is the anterior perspective. We know it's the anterior perspective because the pisiform is visual. The pisiform sits on top of the triquetrum. Notice that the phalanges of the thumb, there are only two, a proximal and distal. All other phalanges have a middle phalange. There are three long bones that make up all the phalanges except for the first. The first phalange are the digits of the thumb. The carpal tunnel is a tunnel that is made by opposition of the thumb to the pinky. Carpal tunnel syndrome is an overuse injury that results from the tendons and the muscles decreasing the size of the tunnel, causing nerve interference.